Buongiorno.
Good morning. Accompanying Don Giussani to Japan in 1987 and listening to him at the conference that he gave in Nagoya and in his visit, or during his visit to Monte Koya, I had the good fortune not only to have passed that time with him, 3-4 days, but also I got a very clear image of how he dialogued with people and how dialogue comes about among people. Dialogue requires availability, the willingness to go long and far beyond conversation, go deeper. And an encounter requires on every occasion that one tries to seek out the essential in the other. And from this sort of dialogue and encounter, we see a story come about. And that, in fact, happened following that journey and a trip of 1987. Today we're going to look into the character of true dialogue, and we have three friends. First of all, they are hosts and guests, which is a rather formal term. I'd rather like to call them friends, friends of the meeting. This applies to His Excellency, His Grace Cardinal Tauran, who has come to the meeting once more. Reverend Professor Shōdō, who is an old friend of the meeting, and I will go back to the whole question of that trip to Japan where we met him. The last time that he was here was 2 years ago, but he has a friendship with this meeting, and the friendship with the meeting started in 1987, and would like him to thank him for coming from so far, crossing the oceans to come here. And as of today, Dr. Tareq Oubrou is now a friend of ours. He comes from Bordeaux, the same city as His Grace the Cardinal, the same city of His Grace Cardinal Tauran, his birthplace. So there's a certain symbology there. And I've already now given you my introduction, really, and I'd like to present the Reverend Shōdō Habukawa. I remember him. It was part of the snapshot that I have of that journey in 1987. I have a snapshot, in fact, an actual photo. The colors have somewhat faded, but he's in that snapshot. And the Reverend Habukawa welcomed Don Giussani, and the friendship continued from that day onwards. And in fact, I'd like to say, continues even today, with the title, People Who Believe Encounter One Another. With this title, I'd like to say that this is what we mean by dialogue. I know that dialogue is an overused word, and we have to give it substance, however. Now, we have our three guests, as I say, and I'd like to give the floor right off to Reverend Professor Habukawa, and he's going to address us. Paola will help us with the translation of the professor's presentation. The floor to you.
Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Fontolan save
saying, mi chiamo Shōdō Habukawa.
My name is Shōdō Habukawa.
Molto grazie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to the meeting in Rimini.
Monsignor Luigi Giussani と初めてご講義をいただくようになりましたのは1987年の6月28日のことでありました。それから瞬く間に23年間の歳月が流れました。
My friendship with Father Giussani started on June 28th, 1987. From the following year, I was invited to the meeting, and since then, 23 years have elapsed.
その後の慰労会の折に私がトレーナ・ソレントを歌うものですから、いつも同じ歌を歌うものですから、ドン・ジュサーニがなぜその歌がそんなに好きなのか尋ねられたことがありました。その時に私はこの歌には哀愁があるから、そのようにお答えしたことがあります。
Father Giussani, at the end of the meeting, often heard me sing Torna a Sorrento, a typical Napolitan song. He asked me why, and I answered because there is some melancholy inside this song.
話され、涙なされたということを教えられました。それ以来、私にとってトレーナ・ソレントはイタリアのすべての皆様方へのノスタルジーを代表する言葉となりました。
After I was told that during a conference, Father Giussani was moved to tears, and since then Torna Sorrento has represented a kind of nostalgia I've always felt for Italy.
ソレントの街とかソレントの風光を知ってるのか尋ねられまして、私は愕然としたことがあります。実は私はソレントについては何も知らなかったのです。
Nevertheless, when once a Japanese friend of mine asked me, "Do you know where Sorrento is? Do you know its landscape?" I was surprised because actually I realized that I knew nothing of this city, Sorrento.
があった時からソレント市のアントニーナ・アプレーニ氏や一族の方々のご厚意でこの夢のソレント訪問が決まったのです。
This time, thanks to the kindness of Antonino Apreda's family, a visit to the wonderful landscape of Sorrento has been added to my program.
かのトレーナ・ソレントに歌われた風光をホテルから、また船上船の上からも満喫させていただき、かつ世界遺産の文物に驚嘆させていただくことができました。
Here I was able to really admire the wonderful landscape. both from Hotel Minerva, where I stayed, and also from the boat. And I was astonished in front of the famous ruins of Paestum and Pompeii, which are part of the World Heritage.
伝統の市長、博物館長、それからすべての皆様方に心からのお礼を申し上げます。
A cominciare dalla famiglia Preda.
Starting from the Preda family, the mayor of Sorrento, the director of the Paestum Museum, and the director of the excavations in Pompeii, I would like to warmly thank all those that have made my stay in Sorrento very pleasant.
Religious sense と日本の真言密教のこのレジャスセンスについて、ただいまからレブラントパオラ・ヘリーチェ同唱師によってご披露をさせていただきますので、ご聴聞くださるようにお願いいたします。
Vorrei ora presentare.
I'd like to start my presentation now, which is about the similarity between the religious conscience of Don Giussani and the Shingon Buddhism that I belong to. For the sake of time, the text will be read directly in the Italian translation. My name is Paola Di Felice, Shingon Docho in the order, and as the author of the translation, I can ensure to you that it was agreed upon with Professor Habukawa word by word. The religious sense of Father Giussani was translated by Tomoko and Kaeda in Japan in 2008. Since then, it has been read with passion, and also to the Japanese, it has become an important reference point as a guide to the religious experience. The structure of the human being, taken as a reference by Father Giussani for the religious experience, reminds us of Immanuel Kant in the Western philosophy, who has laid the foundations of human dignity in an idealistic view of existence. In the religious sense, the preliminary requirements to raise human existence are set. First of all, limit the conscience of the self in daily life so that it does not turn into selfishness, limit laziness and lack of balance in daily life, keep adequate distance from destructive rationalism on the one hand and excessive moralism on the other. Do not idealize what is the subject of the common cognitive abilities. Having put this at the roots of the distinction between good and evil, which is at the basis of the cognitive structure of the human being, you can adopt a universal viewpoint on the phenomena of existence. Father Giussani calls religious sense or religious conscience this emotional structure of the human being. In Father Giussani's thinking, all starts with opening up one's heart to the world of phenomena. In the Buddhist world, the deep structure of the conscience is called alaya conscience. Alaya means deposit. It is a profound sphere of the human being which stores the cognitive experiences which relate to each individual phenomenon. Through a spiritual practice which is based on the 5 principles that I mentioned, this conscience purifies itself and becomes amala conscience, which has considerable similarities with religious sense as set and postulated by Father Giussani. Opening up one's heart to all things means that by practicing the principles that I was mentioning, man takes distance from all the acquired viewpoints and from the control of the latent conscience. putting at the roots of their cognitive abilities the ability to observe the authenticity of the phenomena. The Shingon Buddhism thinks that authentic observation produces compassionate attitudes towards all human beings. Father Giussani expresses the ability to comprehend the authentic level of the phenomena, which are the subject of human knowledge and experience, as the ability to develop a love which goes beyond the love of oneself. By so doing, the conscience emerges that deep down in the heart, the other, which is only the other, is not different from the self, which is not personal at all, and vice versa. Emanuel Swedenborg bases his work, The True Christian Religion, published in 1871, on the principle that the world of phenomena created by God is not only material, but rather interacts with a spiritual level of assistance. He states that according to this principle, and by means of a method of controlling breathing developed right from his childhood, he acquired mystic abilities. Monsignor Ashiyeda, who was a secretary to John Paul II for many years, in his letters titled Conversations Causing a Miracle in the Heart, published in Japan in 2006, makes reference to the piety found in the Vatican. He reports that Michelangelo, in his old age, remembering his young works, said that when he carved the Christ and the Madonna in marble for the piety, he was guided by a divine force. Monsignor Shirieda says it is precisely so. If you contemplate it, the piety gives all this force, sends all this force, and awakens a primordial language in ourselves. The expression of this language acts on a universal level of conscience and is perceived by the hearts of all those who are capable of such experiences. This happens both because of Michelangelo's mystic ability and also because of the mystic ability of all human beings to perceive also what eyes cannot see and establish a natural link of associations similarly to the peaks in a mountain range which follow each other. The religious world of Don Giussani follows exactly this and calls it revelation. At times, in reality, we suddenly perceive a calling. We immediately understand the logos, the language of this calling, and its profound significance. Father Giussani teaches us that in order to cultivate this mystic experience, we inexorably have to experience the authentic level of reality. The word Shingon comes from the Sanskrit mantra. One of the main mantras states that there are 5 founding elements expressed by 5 Sanskrit letters: A, earth; Ba, water; Ra, fire; Ka, wind; Kya, space, ether. In Shingon Buddhism, these are called the 5 great. The mystic force which flows at the basis of these 5 elements is expressed as Hung. The Shingon practitioner, to achieve correct balance, recites the A, Ba, Ra, Ka, Kyang, Hung mantra. In continuous concentration on reciting this mantra produces a mystic and spiritual force inside the human being. I was very brief, but I tried to express the religious sense as expressed by Father Giussani in the Shingon Buddhism that I belong to. Thank you.
Bene, molte grazie per questo.
Thank you very much for this presentation and reading this fascinating report and this parallel examination that the Reverend has developed for us. This is a very special occasion, I said this morning, because we have three friends, three great figures that represent and bring here with them the experience of their faith and a cultural and religious attitude that constitutes much of our contemporary world. So it's a very special opportunity, this that we have here today, to be able to join friendship with these people and have this possibility of hearing from them and see this sort of in-depth encounter take place. Now I would like to present to you the Imam Tareq Oubrou, who was born in Morocco, has lived in France for many years, where he directs the Bordeaux Mosque. He is a religious leader that is working in a pioneer fashion to formulate Islamic law for minorities and with regard to the relationship between minorities and majorities in the French context that we know is very interesting and sometimes full of tension, and which serves as a model, one of the models that we talk a lot about in Europe, a phenomenon which is called Euro-Islam. And Dr. Tareq Oubrou is one of its most significant leaders. And as well as thank him once again, I'd like to thank him especially for this coming at this specific time. You know, this is the month of the Ramadan, but I'd also like to thank him most specially, therefore, for coming at this special time for him to speak at the Rimini meeting.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. I apologize. I don't have a very Italian accent. The theme that we have is a key theme, and this is a considerable challenge for us at a very particular passage of our history, at a very particular time, because in fact perhaps this is the first time that mankind has revealed itself in all its full diversity and in all the breadth of its diversity. And in fact, technology and communication technology, transport technology, have overturned our very relationship with time and space. We have now gone into a phase when space, in fact, becomes smaller and history speeds up. We have an interpenetration of cultures, an interweaving of religions, an penetration of these things because of communications and transport technology and their developments. Our society has become increasingly pluralist and multiple. People travel virtually through the website motorways, and with increasingly comfortable means of physical travel, you don't have to be a great adventure to go out and meet other cultures, other religions in their very specific ecological niches or where they actually have been developed. So our world has changed enormously, and from now on, our humanity is de facto united. Any crisis in any corner of our planet will have immediate repercussions on the political, economics, and spiritual and of the other parts of the planet. Our destinies, in other words, are bound up together. Now, what I think I would like you to take from my presentation is this phenomenon, especially of secularization. And now there is a phenomenon of desecularization. People are coming back to the sense of the spiritual. The 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century were moments of secularization and moving away from spirituality and anything spiritual. These were the times when science dictated truth. It became a church with its own certainties. Now, since the beginning of the 21st century, with Einstein's relativity behind us, with quantum mechanics, with molecular biology and exact sciences, these sciences have entered into a period of epistemological uncertainty and crisis. The Newton certainties and Pascal's certainty, Pascal's physics, have now been replaced by the sense of irrationality that quantum mechanics has lent it. We now have a certain sense of indeterminate science, and with the new uncertainties, we have in fact now come to a new humility on the part of scientists, no longer their arrogance. Science has not been able to solve the existent metaphysical questions that were placed on the table by theology and philosophy. The old questions on the very existence of man, on divinity and what is divine, these questions have once again come to the fore. Science that was a factor of secularization has now become a driving force of a renewed spirituality. So we are now entering a phase in which there is a demand for spirituality and for meaning. The economic, sociological chaos, which has overwhelmed all aspects of our lives, risks to sink us in an unreasonable irrationality. How can one remain spiritual, giving, however, reason its rightful place? So we are in this very different reality today. We have an increasing spiritualization, as it were, of the world, an interweaving of cultures, an interpenetration of philosophical and metaphysical ideas, and a world which has become increasingly porous to ideas and philosophical systems. And this interweaving is not going to be halted. It's going to continue. The other is amongst us. So how can we, as believers, grasp this uncertainty, this existential uncertainty which is encroaching upon our world increasingly? As a believer, I am invited and called to revise my attitudes and look at my own traditions. How can one be rooted in a tradition but at the same time be opened up to a multiple and pluralist world? I believe that the more rooted we are in a given tradition, the more we are able to be open to the rest of the world. And the more we are able to, the more superficial is our traditional sense, the more irritated we come with something different, the more we are turned in on ourselves. So how can one be part of a tradition without enclosing ourselves in a spiritual identity trap, which will deprive us of the richness that diversity and otherness could bring to us? To this regard, one has to think of faith with others, with otherness, with something which is different. The faith and our faith must be proved before the otherness and diversity. How can I see this without my own references? I'm a Muslim, and like any Christian, I am dealing with a revelation. Here we have a relationship with the divine. Uniting myself with the other starts with my encounter with the divine. Any divorce from the divine is a divorce from that which is existential. Our encounter with the divine allows for serenity and equilibrium, which is interior, allows for inner peace. We must start the change, therefore, within us. Change yourself and your whole story and history will change. We're not in a revolutionary situation where the revolutionaries want to change the world but not change them. In this tradition, just as in the other revealed religions, one starts by the self, by the I, in a serene relationship with the divine. Everything achieved which is looked at in the sense of transcendency risks, in fact, floundering in violence. The violence in the family, violence in the society, international violence. The building of peace starts with our peace that we make with the Creator. Diversity is a divine gift which must be cultivated and supported and not combated and fought against and eliminated. The Quran says, as a believer, that among the signs of God and what He has given to the earth is the differences of color and people. The Quran says that this diversity is a sign of the divinity of God. The diversity of people must become united around the unity of the Creator. One, but in diversity. If God had wanted, says the Quran, He would have made of you just one community. To this extent, we need a theology of diversity, therefore, and the sign of God through the new configuration of our humanity. Anthropology today is a theological chapter which gives substance to theological reasoning on the complexity of the human being, on the unity and the individual uniqueness of each and every one of us. The Quran says that all of humanity is concentrated in the humanity. Somebody who kills a soul, it is as if he had killed all of mankind. And if man are concentrated in their individuality, then we must respect the dignity of man. This gives dignity to man. His unity, his abstraction is in this unity, in this singularity. How can one be firmly convinced of something and yet be tolerant? This is the dilemma. And I think that the more we have worked through our convictions, the more tolerant we have become. The lack of tolerance is a sign of doubt is a difficulty to have a rapport with one's own traditions. And so we have to work through this, the theology of the necessity for diversity. The more we see these threats around us, and as we see social injustice, social inequalities, political, economic crises, how can we have interfaith dialogue against the backdrop of geopolitics and against the geotheology, if you like, which underpins violence? This should be the task of the religious person, but also the task of the political actor, the social worker, the task of each individual, because our humanity is in the same boat. And when this boat sinks, we all as human beings sink. We must go against our world, against the planet. We are about to destroy the boat in which we are sailing. We must see the world as all human beings, plants, the planet. We must build this ecological sense which allows us to preserve the planet, to preserve men, thereby preserving the faiths that man has.
Ringrazio molto.
I'd like to thank Dr. Oubrou very much. You have said very many important things that give us much food for thought, things of great interest. Now I'd like to ask our dear friend, His Grace Jean-Louis Tauran, to take the floor. I can't sum up very briefly his career and the various tasks that he has carried out. He was a follower of John Paul II as the so-called Minister of Foreign Affairs for this Pope. It's not really the right term, says the Speaker, but this was his office. From 2007, he is a president for the Council for Interfaith Dialogue. Thank you once again for coming.
Those who believe encounter each other. I think that this panel is a clear sign of this, especially what the rector Oubrou has said bears witness to this. We believe that each human being was endowed with unique dignity by the Creator. When one thinks that each human being is the subject of inalienable rights and freedoms, when one believes that serving one's neighbor, a person whom we've not chosen, means growing up in humanity, and when one believes that the earth and its resources, as Director Oubrou said, managed by human beings who preserve them and make them proliferate to serve the common good, then we can well understand the importance of a cooperation among all believers in view of the common good. I don't want you to believe that all religions are the same, though. Interreligious dialogue always starts with stating one's own and affirming one's own religious identity. And I was very pleased to hear what Rector Oubrou said. Interreligious dialogue cannot rely on ambiguity. It's a matter of understanding the others. It's a matter of understanding the contents of the other's religion, to understand what is inside each religion and see what we can do together at the service of society. We Catholics respect what is true and saint in the other religions. Indeed, we acknowledge that many of the values in the other religions not rarely reflect a ray of that freedom which lights up all human beings. I was in the Far East recently, and I was thinking to myself, we as Christians can receive a lot from the other religious traditions. For example, we receive a stimulus from our Muslim friends in praying, in fasting, begging. Our Hindu friends tell us a lot of things in relation to contemplation and meditation. Our Buddhist friends help us better understand the importance of detaching oneself from the material world, and they also teach us the respect of life, and so on and so forth. Also, the followers of other religions can find in our Christian faith values which can help them spiritually. Not to be too long, I would like to mention the concept of a God with a human face, as mentioned in the encyclical Spe Salvi of Pope Benedict. A God that calls us by our name, a God who's interested in our lives. And also the universality and unity of the Christian family show that we can experience diversity in unity. You know, being mutually enriched by this spiritual heritage, we have to become better people. We are believers and citizens. I'm not saying we are either believers or citizens. I'm saying we are believers and citizens and human beings, and this, of course, has to be advantageous and beneficial to the whole society. A question comes spontaneous then. What can we as believers do together for the benefit, for the material benefit and spiritual benefit of all? In this precarious world that also Rector Oubrou was referring to, I see 4 or rather 5 tasks that we can carry on together. First of all, a pedagogy of living together. You know, since each religion is practiced within the framework of a community, our praying assemblies and also social activities of religious inspiration, for example, our schools, are all places where you learn how to live with the others. You learn how to respect the uniqueness of the others. Every person must find a consoling word in what believers tell him or her. These words must be comforting words, healing words, guiding words. We shouldn't be afraid, furthermore, to distinguish between good and evil. And one of the tasks, the second one that we have to carry out, is an ethical proposal. We shouldn't be scared of distinguishing between good and bad. We have to remember the rights and duties of people and institutions. We have to, together, break the walls that fear has created, fear of the others. It's not a matter of imposing, but of proposing, and this is what is possible thanks to interreligious, interfaith and ecumenic dialogue. We have to demonstrate that it is possible to live the difference, to overcome the difference in brotherhood. By so doing, little by little, you move from fear of the others to having no fear, or fearing for the others. This means that the others' rights are my own rights, and I have the same fears that the others have. A pluralist society can only rely on two basic elements which are essential to all believers, that is, justice and peace. The third task we can carry out together is passion for serving. Here we witness the fact that there are many volunteers, especially young people belonging to various religions. Together with common initiatives, we implement acceptance and solidarity. Together we can share attitudes so that the places where we accept people are places of proximity, where those who suffer feel at home. Another task is contributing to behaving as responsible citizens. Of course, the religions don't have to propose technical solutions to politicians, but they have to educate the conscience of the religious followers so that none of them is indifferent before injustice and inequality. The believers should not be scared of criticizing any initiative which does not contribute to the human good. They have to support politicians, reminding them of the fact that politics is not all. Fifth and final and last task is religious testimony, which is essentially a spiritual task. The churches and the religions cannot be happy with just disseminating humanistic values. Their membership must also give signs of their faith and spirituality. They must show that the believers have found meaning and hope in religion, both for today and tomorrow. In this secularized world, at least God must remain at the horizon of society, simply for the fact that we should not forget about the fact that human beings don't live out of bread only. Since we're now in Europe, I'd like to identify 4 fields, 4 areas where the believers should join forces to improve the situation. First of all, the city. I think we should be all united in order to fight against anonymity and ghettos. And then recreational movements. You know, we are a society of the leisure time. In Rimini, it's enough to walk in the streets and realize this. We should help each other to cultivate beauty. We should help each other share emotions and high-quality cultural initiatives. I'm referring to music events and sport events. This is something we can do together. Third, education. You know, it is at school that you learn about brotherhood, about respecting differences. However, one's own schoolmates and the transmission of the past facts, what the French call the devoir de mémoire, all contribute to educating man, the believers, and the citizens. Finally, last factor, hospitality. In multi-ethnic societies such as ours, we have to be able to accept the others, listen to them, understand them, and act. In today's world, if the believers have a power to exercise, it is what I call the power of the heart. I mean, being there where people suffer. And we know that the faithful, the believers, are in the forefront when it comes to dealing with the sick people or with the elderly. I always remember what happened to me very recently in a small place near Lodi, near Milan. I was visiting the Casa della Carità, the charity home. A priest and a nun take care of 12 disabled people there with 50 volunteers from the neighboring parishes. When I visited this place, I met Patrizia, a mother who had a stroke at the age of 40 and felt as a prisoner of her body. She only communicates with the outside world by moving her eyelids and chin. She's got a special computer. She can compose words through this computer, and she had made a small speech for me, which I could read on the computer. I was very moved. I wanted to bless her, and I realized that her head was resting on a scarf. And on this scarf, a sentence had been embroidered, the following sentence: I live because someone loves me. I think this is wonderful. It needs no comments.
Detto tutto questo,
having said this, I can't but add another comment, another consideration, which is the following. The believers and their communities face two basic crises, in my opinion, two fundamental crises. One is a crisis of intelligence, and one is a crisis of what I call transmission. I think we are faced with a huge crisis of intelligence. We are super informed, but we can't reason anymore. There is a lot of noise around us. We move here and there very much. We have a lot of advertisements all around us. We don't read anymore. We don't think. We can't organize our knowledge properly. Everything must be obtained immediately, on the spot. We, as believers, have a duty, that is, cultivating and disseminating what we can call the interior life. Pascal, in one of his pensées, said, "Le grand malheur des hommes," that is, the worst fact to human beings is not to be able to rest in their room, praying, meditating. Meditation and prayer put us in the right condition to help fellow human beings to live with more value and humanity. Think of this crisis of the intelligence then. Furthermore, the crisis of transmission, of tradition. You are parents and you know this better than me. Moral values, ethical values, family values are not taken for granted anymore. the religious illiteracy is terrible in the West. Suffice it to visit a cathedral in the Western world and listen to the comments of young people faced with the Tower of Babel or the Apostles. They don't know anything about this. They're completely ignorant. And also we come across young people, but even adults, who have lost dignity. They don't have a sense of dignity. There was a slogan on the walls of the Sorbonne University: it is prohibited to prohibit. So our societies following this have become like ships which are adrift. Without a religious dignity, the world is not understandable anymore. This is why there is a return to religion. Very often we have young people who are without a heritage and builders without models to follow. We, as believers, can convey our inheritance and really propose models on which to build something. Let me conclude by saying that God has his place in society. There is no civilization which is completely free of a religious dimension. We, as believers, must be brave and coherent enough to speak on behalf of our Lord and propose our values. I'm addressing all Catholics now to say that it is said that we are a minority. Well, I don't know. I know, however, that we are a minority which counts, and you bear witness to this here. So we have to retrieve the pride of being Catholics, because we belong to a big family where holiness is certainly more important than many bad things which are around us in this world. So don't forget the spiritual asset that we have and that we have to transmit, to convey to the others. We always have to keep in mind that if the Lord wanted us to be in this world, it is in this world that we have to flourish. Let me close with a sentence by Seneca, an old rector. I'm going to quote in Latin because it's beautiful, and then I'll translate him.
Non quia difficile sunt non audemus, sed quia non audemus sunt difficilia. Ciò che vuol dire in italiano.
The translation is many things, not because they are difficult, we don't dare do, but it is because we don't dare do that they become difficult. So my last word is let's dare. Thank you.
Bene, io ringrazio.
I would like to thank very warmly His Grace for many things, and also this ending, let's dare. It reminds me of the conclusion of a famous presentation by Don Giussani here. I hope that you will never rest in peace. Your ending, therefore, reminds me of this very enthusiastic presentation that we heard. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to become committed. Young people, you said, are heirs without an inheritance. We need to build this. Many things have been said this morning, and I'd like to underline an expression that Dr. Oubrou used with regard to traditions, which, if you like, goes against the mainstream of what we usually believe. He said, the more one is rooted in one's tradition, the more one is open. And I think this is very, very important for ideology today. And by way of conclusion, I'd like to thank and pay tribute to the great tradition which has been brought here by Reverend Habukawa, with whom we are bound by a very strong friendship, because what you said about the opening up of our heart to the phenomenic world, the need to be compassionate, come up against reality which calls us to its fundamental structure, the Logos. These are very key themes that the meeting for many years has tried to look into. I'm very thankful, therefore, to all of you for listening so attentively to our three guests of this morning. Thank you, and have a good day.
Dottor Oubrou, les photographes en photo. Oui. Oui, va benissimo. Così. Ecco, vicini.